Next panelist is Professor Gregory. And Professor Gregory is so popular among all of us. Retired from the Kannur University Department of Anthropology. And I know him as, or many of us know him as, probably an academic activist in the sense that he was instrumental in introducing anthropology in the school curriculum in the state of Kerala. Professor Gregory, please.
Okay. Good evening to all. Hope I am audible.
Yes, you are audible. Yes, audible? You are audible. Please go ahead.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good evening to all. And I am very pleasing to participate in this important symposium on contemporary crisis in Indian anthropology. And my predecessors, Professor Mutatkar and Professor Joshi, had outlined some of the problems that Indian anthropology is facing today. And I will continue in the same line, and I'll brief some of the important points that I want to project. Now, as far as crisis in anthropology is concerned, as Professor Mishra himself has pointed out, that it is not something new, it has been there since Malinowski, Levi-Strauss, and Raymond Worth, Rodney Needham, etc. Now, I have looked at this crisis in anthropology on along with seven important aspects. The first aspect is subject identity crisis, and the second aspect is existential or survival crisis. The third is crisis of subject matter and appropriation. The fourth point is crisis of social relevance. The fifth point is research and dissemination crisis. Then personal value crisis. Then institution efficiency crisis. Then employment crisis. So coming to the subject identity crisis, as already pointed out by Professor Joshi, anthropology being a subject, the hallmarks of which are holism and integration, it is under constant threat. In fact, anthropology is not exclusive to natural science or humanities or social sciences, but it is inclusive of all. But this particular aspect is not well recognized. There is an increasing tendency for specialism at the cost of integration. And there is an uneasy coexistence and competition with sister disciplines. And anthropology, though recognized as a subject, it is not included in the curriculum of the mainstream academic or professional bodies. Coming to the second crisis, existential or survival crisis, there is less visibility, less popularity, less demand for the subject. When I am giving these points, it may not be the intensity of these problems are not same across India. But some universities and some departments face more of these problems than other departments. There are dwindling takers, as Professor Joshi pointed out. Particularly in South India, we see that the seekers for anthropology subject is dwindling, and it may be a symptom of the kind of demand for the subject or the image of its demand in the job market. We are unable to convince the stakeholders, the political class, of our claim of anthropology as a people's science. Academically, anthropology is confined mostly to PG level of teaching, and only in a few universities PG teaching too is confined. At the UD level, only few colleges and in a few states. And anthropology is not a subject at the professional training, including Bar Council, AICTE, with alternative competitors well established. Coming to the crisis of subject matter and appropriation, the strength of anthropology lies in its field approach and its holistic understanding of cultures. Fieldwork itself is not anymore exclusive to anthropology today. On the other hand, there is an increasing tendency to belittle the significance of fieldwork in anthropological researches. Similarly, culture has become a subject of concern in many disciplinary studies other than anthropology. A work may become anthropological not necessarily by its label, but by its nature and essence. Coming to the crisis of social relevance. We have many times failed to respond to the call of the times. So it is bound to create a crisis of sorts. Anthropological response to contemporary and burning social issues not much forthcoming. Can there be an anthropological response to social issues without divergent views, voices, without bias or partisan stand? That others could identify it as something unique to anthropology. Can we discern the sense of anthropologicality in our approach? A consensual approach in anthropological viewpoint. Coming to the research and dissemination crisis, there are not many researchers on innovative, challenging, and compelling human issues, or that could create a definite policy impact. There are not many analytical studies and concept and theory building, which is unique to Indian situation. The extent of our researchers, we have to ask this question: to what extent our researchers adhere to the basic research principles, namely beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and respect. We should also ask how sensitive we are to adhere to the professional ethics, how conscious we are of politics of representation, and how, to what extent we maintain integrity. And another important problem that we come across is the non-visibility of our research output or policy reflections. Coming to the person value crisis, relativistic perspective with a holistic vision, the anthropological value to be reflected in our livelihood. We have to turn to become role models in our respective fields of engagement. Erickson says, many anthropologists are impeccable cultural relativists in their daily work, while they may perfectly well have definite, frequently dogmatic notions about right and wrong in their private lives. Dubious credibility and integrity among professional anthropologists who are expected to impart the greatest humanistic values of the subject on the young minds. We also experience and come across power manipulations, jealousy, autocracy, arrogance, aggressiveness, bullying, selective perception, which are not uncommon among anthropologists in India. There is also internal fight among and lack of coordination between our related departments and institutions. Coming to the institution efficiency crisis, not all our departments maintain healthy and intellectual ambience. There are not many academic debates, dialogues, and exchanges that are characteristic in our departments. Many times we come across divided house of departments of anthropology, lacking mutual recognition and appreciation, which is not uncommon. Also, we see not networking with anthropology-related departments and organizations, which reduces efficiency. We don't much maintain regular contact with the required networks.
It's again internet problem, sir.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
He's back.
no visibility of its applicability and of its social relevance, not exemplifying our presence wherever we are, not imprinting our anthropological stamp to create a demand. There is a low motivation and professional competency which is seen to be common with among young anthropology candidates, with not much efforts to enhance it. There is a tendency for easygoing and not active enough to seek for opportunities, which is also found to be common. And there are systematic efforts to sideline anthropology from career openings by vested interests and system and other disciplines. Now, what is the way forward? Taking each of the crises, the subject identity crisis, anthropology could justify its existence, relevance, and significance only as long as it maintains its exclusive identity. Integratedness should get reflected in the curriculum and syllabus. We should revert to its basic orientation of force-field approach in its true spirit of integration. Uphold its true identity by including it under the faculty of anthropological sciences instead of very selective faculties like faculty of humanities, faculty of science, faculty of arts, faculty of social sciences. By including anthropology in one particular faculty, we reduce its identity. So it is better to have a faculty of anthropological sciences with its degree being in anthropological sciences. So we will have bachelor's in anthropological sciences or master in anthropological sciences, similar to master in social work. We can begin with those universities where anthropologists head the universities. With regard to existential or survival crisis, the students at school level are exposed to different aspects of human beings in biology and social studies, which includes economics, geography, history, and civics, but they gain no integrated understanding. So what is required is we need to universalize anthropology at school level, as Professor Joshi mentioned, and professionalize it at higher educational level. We have to exert pressure to include anthropology in CBSE syllabus. We have to make it as a common subject at the college level, with developing a competency sufficient enough to handle anthropology at civil service. At PG level, it should be placement oriented. There could be integrated program with a comprehensive curriculum. Should be made as basics in professional courses, optional in related subjects, and foundational anthropology as open course. We have to also organize popular lectures. Coming to the crisis of subject matter and appropriation, we need to become firmly grounded in anthropological orientation. Our attitude, value orientation, approach, understanding should reflect anthropological perspectives and values. Our works should reflect anthropological holism and voice the anthropological perspectives. With regard to the crisis of social relevance, we need to develop a basic talisman to characterize an anthropological response to social issues. We have to subject the issues of everyday life and contemporary social issues to anthropological scrutiny for a holistic and integrated understanding without any partisan or biased perspective. We should make anthropology visible to the common people as well as the intelligentsia. With regard to the research and dissemination crisis, we need to extend the horizons of anthropological researchers. We need to strictly adhere to the basic principles of research and professional ethics by giving due place to the subjects of research. We need to make visible all the anthropological research outputs, encourage analytical studies and conceptual formulations, make cultural and intellectual outputs into policy translations, impacting people's lives. With regard to the problem of person value crisis, We need to be role models for younger generation and exemplify with anthropological impact and professional integrity, freeing from dogmatic fixation, intolerance, and aggression. Adopt relativistic and humanistic value perspectives and values of simplicity and humility, the lessons that we boast to learn from our indigenes. We need to display mutual respect, recognition, and appreciation. In short, let anthropology become our way of life. Coming to institution efficiency crisis, we need to take stock of all academic institutions and anthropology-related departments, organizations, and institutions. Let there be an institutional networking at the micro and macro levels. Let the academic departments establish a healthy and intellectual ambience for exchange of views and ideas at the level of people and at the level of scholars. Let there be cultural and policy translation centers with accessibility to the public. Let it provide a connecting link to its alumni networking. Let there be career guidance and placement cells. Let us leave the subject to voluntary accreditation to assess its anthropological excellence. And the last crisis, employment crisis, let placement become part of the curriculum. There should be no compromise in the quality and the intensity of training to equip oneself to compete with other disciplinary competitors. There should be openings for higher level training for competency enhancement. We should develop a thirst for in-depth knowledge, deep sense of curiosity, and continuous enhancement of one's competency. We should seek for career opportunities and furthering one's career prospects. We should also expand the career prospects and resist any tendency to deprive our professional opportunities. To conclude, we need to undergo the process of self-reflexivity. We need to reinvent anthropology by engaging with society. We need to adopt an anthropological oath, taking a pledge to become firmly rooted in the spirit of anthropology. We need to earmark a day as Anthropology Day. As of now, 3rd Thursday of February is observed as the Anthropology Day. We need to consider this and to take pride of our discipline and make its collective identity visible to the public. Let us become proactive in collectively responding to the contemporary crisis in anthropology. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gregory, for this wonderful PowerPoint presentation. It's very useful, I believe, but I think all of us had access to the PowerPoint. At least I could see it very well. Thank you so much. I think our next panelist is Professor Shalina Mehta. Shalina Mehta is a professor from Panjab University, Chandigarh. She had a very long stint as a professor of anthropology and a very distinguished member of our community. May I now request Professor Mehta to make her presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning, Mishra. Glad to connect with all of you, and after so many enlightened perspectives on the subject, I'm afraid I'm going to sound somewhat of a contrarian position. Mishra said right in the beginning, most of us here have had about 40 years of experience in leadership. And Gregory then said, let's do some self-reflexivity. I call it introspection. And I do this introspection not only for my own self, but I think for many of us here who have spent long innings in anthropology without really taking stock of the position that how and why we failed. And I take this as a very, very categorical position. I may agree or disagree with a lot of what Gregory said. It's a very idealistic kind of a position in a very changing environment where departments are no longer being considered relevant. You have schools coming up all over the place. So to talk for an individualistic position in which anthropology can survive as disconnect in the form of being disconnected from other disciplines is really not going to happen. It's a world of interdisciplinary studies. It is a world of integrated approaches. It is no longer a world where you can have an exclusive anthropological approach. So it's very, very important and pertinent for us to have our own identity. But let me just reflect back on where and how and on what all fronts we have failed to keep, or we've contributed to what Gregory thinks is the crisis of anthropology. As Mishra rightly said, for decades we've been saying there's crisis of anthropology, there's crisis of identity, there's crisis of survival. But here, particularly in the context of India, when Professor Mutatkar was speaking, and he was constantly referring to the works of Iravati Karve, I simply want to ask the simple question, how many departments of anthropology in India ever taught Iravati Karve or her contributions? It certainly did not happen in North India. As a student, as a teacher of social cultural anthropology, her contributions were not part of our curriculum. Who made those curriculums? Why those curriculums were constructed? Today we want to talk about Indian anthropology. How many Indian anthropologists and their approaches have we incorporated in our curriculums in the last 4 decades? You've just referred to a crisis in southern India. I almost have a feeling as if there is a regional divide the way anthropology was taught in the country for 40 years. One attempt that I recall very distinctively was made by UGC to present a curriculum for the entire country for anthropology. Failed miserably. Mutatkar sir was at the helm of the affairs when we did this marathon exercise for almost 3 weeks or so, brought out a united curriculum where it made mandatory that you have to have 4 positions. Most departments, unfortunately, did not even open that massive book which contained n number of courses which could have given anthropology its integrated identity. So who failed? We failed. Today we talk about some departments becoming departments of anthropology, some department integrated, Joshi was emphasizing on this, that we must have an integrated notion or construct of anthropology. But let us please do some introspection. When departments decided to become predominantly physical anthropology or cultural anthropology, weren't the positions converted? Is there a single department in the country that today has a position for linguistics? Please do inform me if there is one. I don't know of any. Why Department of Anthropology had to take the name of human biology or human genetics? Because they thought that they will have probably a better future. Maybe they can create a pathway for their student. In the process, they were left in the lurch. They were neither here nor there. What about archaeology? How many departments of anthropology in northern India that I know for sure, where I've been a student of Delhi University and taught at Panjab University, How many positions were ever created for archaeologists? The ones that I know for sure were converted into physical anthropology as far as Punjab University was concerned. I do not know what is the story now in Delhi University. Probably Delhi University also doesn't have a single archaeological a person specializing in archaeology teaching there. So this introspection, when we are talking about, we also refer to publication. How many journals of anthropology today have international recognition? Who failed? Us. When we started publishing in journals outside the country, which in our times was a very, very difficult proposition, it is because you had this entire concept of citation index. If you don't have those citations, then you are not recognized or your work is not recognized. We also did not encourage our students to innovate, and that's my biggest challenge. Did we innovate enough? Did we change our curriculums depending upon the demands and the needs of the time? Somebody the other day was talking about business anthropology or anthropology of management or about training, about apprenticeship. Fieldwork is becoming a dying tradition. Now, if other disciplines have borrowed our methodology, have borrowed our approach, and have expanded upon it, wasn't that a total failure of our ability to market the strengths of our discipline, market the reasons why anthropology had a unique standing? Somebody was talking about, because we are studying marginalized communities, that is why we are a marginalized discipline. The disciplines that have taken over job opportunities from our students, where people were regularly hired with anthropology specialization, is primarily because we remain in a theoretical status quo. We told our students not to become activists. We told our students our job is to generate data and leave it for academic purposes. We really never asked them. We were taught to do that, and we never asked our students to go beyond that. So today, if social work takes away those jobs from us, who's responsible for it? Aren't we responsible for it? Where did we fail to innovate? To take any kind of ideological position today, yes, the integrated nature of anthropology is critical, not only for the survival of the discipline, but for the criticality of its approach. Because what we know today is primarily because of our humanistic approach and how it is being utilized. I was intrigued that today when we are talking about crisis in anthropology, there are articles and papers being written with the titles like in times of consumer behavior, how do you encourage markets? And an article dated July 2020 by Hugo Refalovich on a platform called Wavestone is actually propagating anthropology as the way to keep the markets alive. And the title that I seem to have somehow misplaced here, the key to innovation, sorry, I got it. The key to innovation in times of crisis is the question mark. And the answer is anthropology, exclamation mark. Do we really, people have taken up those areas. They have brought the question of, they have brought it in areas and domains. So are we going to remain sacrosanct? Are we going to remain in a temple-like situation where we'll say we are not going to allow our students to innovate? When our students started innovating and going into areas like cyber research, going into design anthropology, moving away from core areas. Weren't they innovating enough? Did we encourage them to do so? Did we innovate enough in terms of our methodology? And there is this gradual grudge or crisis, and Otaji is here and he's going to speak after me. Policy. You know, there has been some kind of what you call as some kind of reluctance on our part to engage with the policy. What is it an outcome of? Is it an outcome of our inability to believe that the kind of work we have been doing has policy relevance, that it is going to grant us some kind of position in the particular domain? By political anthropology, for example, was left only to the political scientist. Why disciplines like mass communication, which actually originated out of anthropology, we've not, by Department of Anthropology, failed to evolve subjects like media, communication studies, which had a market for them. What is it? What was the pathway that we showed? I remember in all this, you know, there was a time when Department of Anthropology, Punjab University did not have a single student. Today, we get them like in 50s and 60s, and sometimes the department is not able, doesn't have large classrooms to accommodate them. Why did that change happen? Because suddenly the relevance, you know, the importance that the discipline is offering you some kind of outlets. When organizations like UNESCO and UNO started inviting them and calling them for job opportunities, we restricted our domain. So therefore the intention is this, that let us get over and let us really, through this platform and forum, we have to follow a two-way approach. First, hold on to the necessity of having a formalized institutional space for anthropology across board, starting from school level to undergraduate and graduate. But please remember that with the new structure coming up, with the new education policy making all those changes, where you are going to have only one research forum, you are not going to have bodies like ICSSR or social sciences receiving separate funding. Do you think survival of anthropology as a unitary discipline in an isolated space, as Gregory was trying to tell us, is going to be feasible or possible? So are we, through this forum, going to propagate a kind of an outdated classic model of anthropology, or are we going to innovate and think out of the box? Think out of the box with the kind of opportunities that we can provide to people who have had training in anthropology, people who are actually looking for employment opportunities in areas which are not purely. What do our students wait for? They wait for becoming either postdoctoral fellows at the most, or few of them may get some kind of opening in the departments. We don't have to train them to do that. We have to train them and bring about those methodological changes. And of course, it's very, very important for us to have a relook at our curriculum and start with what Professor Mutatkar said, that there has been an independent tradition of Indian anthropology. Nobody has ever really written or talked about it in so many words and tried to assert to the rest of the world that we do have an independent tradition of Indian anthropology, which was as strong as whether it was Molluskian or Retd, Brownian or Boston tradition in other parts of the world. So through this forum, if I insist, and I've been persistently telling Professor Behera, our next target should be that it should be introduced at the school level as part of the CBSE curriculum. Yes, IS is one platform, but I sometimes regret how many IS officers we have produced with our training in anthropology? How many of them have actually gone on to promote anthropology as a discipline? And that's the tragedy. There's the tragedy that you sometimes get to hear, maybe because you people are too lenient. And that is why so many people with anthropology qualify, or your curriculum is not as good as that of the other disciplines. So let us demand some kind of a justification from them. The areas that are demanding or coming up, market opportunities that are there. We have miserably failed in the past to become a pressure group. And if this forum can become an active pressure group to pursue the interest of the discipline, to tell people the relevance of the subject, to highlight how we are going to, what is so distinct about our discipline and our approach, that we are the ones who, why should we now try and tell them that this is the most relevant science of human societies? It is the most relevant science of human societies. So they have to pay attention. They have to seek our intervention rather than us all the time trying to prevail upon them. Departments of cultural studies, you'll be surprised. The English departments, when they reconstruct and take their names as Department of Cultural Studies, what is it they're doing? They're rehashing anthropological texts. And then the tragedy is that when somebody like Arjun Appadurai visits your university, he doesn't even know that there is a department of anthropology. So for me, that is a greater tragedy, that we've not really been able to assert, we've not really been able to establish our identity, we've not really been able to show our youngsters what should be the way forward for them. So please, for once, my earnest request to all of you is that let us get together and become some kind of a think tank by which we can think of approaches by which we make the subject popular rather than keeping it as an isolated domain by itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. As usual, it was very assertive, and probably this is a kind of invitation to further debate and deliberation. So thank you so much.